All right, they told me this is kind of like federal court and I'm stuck to a podium and I hate that, but we'll make do with it. We'll make do the best we can. So the topic today is going to be recognizing traumatic brain injuries. Now, I understand that there's some people in here that have recognized and have prosecuted these cases for decades. And there's also other folks in here that are just learning that brain injuries can happen in a car wreck, you know. So I've got to just kind of meld the two. I want to give everybody certain things about this so that everybody takes something away that helps them. So if y'all stay with me, I promise you, everybody here will take something away. I want to begin by telling you a story. And it's something that really happened in my office about 17 years ago. I was a young lawyer. I was struggling. I'd never seen a brain injury case. In fact, most of my cases were family law and criminal law and some real basic car wreck cases. There weren't a whole lot to them, honestly, until somebody came in my office. There was a man and wife, and they sat down across the table from me. And the man was adamant. There is nothing wrong with me. I am perfectly fine. Why don't you leave me alone? Why am I even here? Went on like that for like 20 minutes. The wife looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "This is not the man I married. Something radically bad happened to him in a car wreck, and I need your help." And from that little start, ended up developing a case that settled for almost $9.5 million. Okay? These cases can happen, and they can be very, very big when they happen. They're not all big cases, but you need to be on the lookout for it. Recognizing these cases is the primary thing that you can do as a lawyer to know when you've got a good one, and when you've got a good one, then you can start to prosecute it. We've got several goals from today. First goal, I want us to recognize traumatic brain injuries by the time we're done. We're going to do that by going through a good definition of traumatic brain injury. We're going to go through the comments with that and the symptomatology. And from that, we're going to build out a tool, a symptom recognition tool that each one of you can take back to your practice today, okay? In my firm, many times now, we have people that are interviewing clients that are non-lawyers to begin with. A tool like this is very, very helpful for them, but it's also helpful for you if you are interviewing a client so that you don't miss areas in which they may or may not be impaired. The third thing we're going to do if we have time, and I think we will, because I think they gave us a little extra time, is we're going to give you a bonus injury that's related to traumatic brain injuries that many practitioners simply don't even think to evaluate. And they can be very valuable and can be a very valuable addition onto your case. So let's get started. Recognizing TBI, the first thing we have to do is get a definition. I use the definition that's found in this book right here, the Neuropsychological Assessment. Lezak's book, it's a 5th edition. There's a reason that I use this definition because there are other definitions that are out there. But this definition is used as a textbook in almost every neuropsychological field, class. We end up with defense experts, plaintiffs experts. Everybody has this book, okay? That's why we use it. Now, there are 2 editions. There's a 5th edition and a 4th edition. Some of the older guys will have the 4th edition. The newer guys will have the 5th edition. The reason that I like the definition that I use from the American Congress of Rehabilitation Medicine is that it is specifically mentioned in both the 5th and the 4th edition of this book, okay? In my paper, in a footnote to the paper, you will see the page and line number for both editions. So if you are cross-examining that defense neuropsychologist that's saying that your person isn't brain injured, you're going to be able to take them to their textbook that is on their table, okay, and show them that it has been adopted there, that has been referred to in the neuropsychological assessment. In the neuropsychological world, this book is considered the Holy Bible, okay? I've literally gotten defense experts to say, yeah, the neuropsychological assessment, that's kind of like the Bible for our industry, okay? If you can set them up with that from the very beginning, then they really are going to be stuck using your definition, okay? So here's the definition that's given by the ACRM. It's very, very simple. Now, there are four parts of the definition. I've only highlighted 3, and there's a reason for that. The 4th really just, all it does is delineate the line between a mild traumatic brain injury and a moderate. Trust me, if you have a moderate traumatic brain injury, you're going to know you have a brain injury. There's not going to be a question, okay? You're going to be able to recognize it. So we start with any period of loss of consciousness. If you lose consciousness, by definition, you have had a traumatic brain injury, okay? For any period of time. If it's more than 30 minutes, then we drop down to 4, and that's kind of the line between moderate and mild. But any period of loss of consciousness will get you there. Any loss of memory for the events immediately before or after the accident. In other words, if we have any period of amnesia, retrograde amnesia, that's going to qualify. Or, and this is the important one, any alteration in the mental state at the time of the accident. Feeling dazed, feeling confused, not knowing where you are. It doesn't have to be very long. It can be very transient. But any period of that will qualify. What we think of as a concussion is a brain injury. When people say, well, I'm okay, I only had a concussion, you better evaluate them for a brain injury. You better evaluate them and see, is this one of those long-term brain injuries, or is this one that's transient and short and goes away? Next. That's it. I can quit now, right? It's over. I've given you a definition. I've given you a definition that you can use. But there's a whole lot more to the story here. This definition has a comment section and has a symptomatology section that if you will use it, it will transform the way that you deal with defense objections, that you deal with defenses that are brought up, and that you identifying the symptoms of the traumatic brain injury. So let's squeeze the lemon a little bit here. All right, the comment section, and the comment section is really good about helping us with typical defenses, right? The comment section includes one of the common defenses that we see is, well, they couldn't be brain injured because their head didn't hit anything in the car wreck. Wrong, right? Comment section, number 3, the brain undergoing an acceleration-deceleration movement, i.e. whiplash, without direct external trauma to the head. That qualifies as a traumatic brain injury. So when you have an expert that is focusing on that fact and is trying to elevate that fact, then you're able to say, well, sir, you're really not being fair here, right? The definition itself says that this can be from a whiplash type of injury, that can cause a traumatic brain injury. But you're emphasizing facts that really don't matter. You see, you're misleading the jury. So right here we have just a golden nugget that's there for us. And there's another one a little further down in the same comment. CT, MRI, EEG, or routine neurological evaluations may be normal. When that same expert says, yeah, but the CT they gave them in the ER was normal, you're going to say, the definition says that they're routinely normal. That happens all the time. Yeah, but the MRI 6 months later didn't show anything. That's right. They're routinely normal in situations like this. I can tell you from experience that about 94% of the time, your initial MRIs are normal. It's very rare that you have an MRI that's going to show traumatic brain injury. It just is. All right. More nuggets. Symptoms may persist for varying lengths of time. You will always have these defense doctors who will get up and say, yeah, they got their bell rung, yeah, they had a concussion, but these always get better in 2 or 3 months. Anything after 2 or 3 months, the person is not, they're not being truthful with you, they're not being honest, they're faking. You get the idea. The definition itself indicates that people with mild traumatic brain injury can exhibit persistent emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and physical symptoms, alone or in combination, which may produce a functional disability. Persistent. So you can use the definition itself to cross-examine these idiots. All right. Most of what we're here for today, though, is recognizing, do we have one, do we not? The symptomatology section of this definition is key to us really fleshing this out. And it's also going to be key to the second thing that I promised you, and that's giving you a tool that you can take back and use in your practice. There are 4 areas of symptoms: physical, cognitive, behavioral, and emotional. We're going to focus on the first 3 because the definition does. The emotional symptoms are honestly so expected and so normal after any car wreck that it's very hard to really cut those out and say this is related to the brain injury versus this is related to just being hurt bad. Okay, there are symptoms of depression that we sometimes see, that we almost always see after significant brain injuries. These depressive effects are very similar to what we would see, what we call reactive depression, where somebody's just reacting to the bad thing that occurred in their life, like a bad car wreck or divorce or anything else. But the symptoms of depression can also be caused in a brain injury from changes in the chemical makeup of the brain. Okay, there can be physical changes. The good thing is, when dealing with emotional issues, is that they're treated the same. They can be treated, exactly the same, and you would treat it just like you would treat any other depression, and with varying degrees of success, of course, but you can treat it that way. So let's dive into the symptoms. These symptoms are going to help us as we flesh out and as we build out our tool. Physical symptoms include nausea, vomiting, dizziness, headache, blurred vision, sleep disturbance, quickness to fatigue, lethargy, or other sensory loss. Now focus on the other sensory loss for a minute. What are other senses? Smell. Hearing. Taste. Couldn't hear. Sight. Touch. Think about that. All 5 of the senses can be affected by this. So if we have somebody who has numbness, and we see numbness a lot of times it's caused orthopedically, right, from these car wreck cases, but we can have one-sided numbness down a face, down our entire one side of our body. Numbness can be caused both by interruptions of the nerve, but it can also be caused by the brain injury. Okay, so if we have numbness that we can't explain with an MRI that shows an impingement of a nerve, for instance, that could be a sign and symptom of a traumatic brain injury. Sight. With traumatic brain injuries, what kind of sensory issues do we deal with? I will tell you that it's rare when I have somebody that has a real significant ongoing persistent brain injury that they don't have issues with light. They're very sensitive to light, especially for fluorescent light. Okay? We have to turn off the lights all the time if we talk to them. Just turn off the lights, and a lot of times they'll be wearing dark glasses, or it's something that will certainly help them a lot of times in that area. But that's something to be on the lookout for. Light, sound, hearing, tinnitus, ringing of the ears. That can be a terrible symptom of a traumatic brain injury. A person with ongoing tinnitus that can't be treated is living in hell, because they can't sleep, they can't focus, they can't think, they can't do anything just because of the constant ringing in the ears. Okay? Taste and smell. Taste and smell are related. They run along the same lingual nerve into the frontal lobe of the brain. Okay? If you have taste or smell problems, it's going to affect the weight of the person. So when you see rapid weight gains or rapid weight loss, that's a potential problem that could be related to a traumatic brain injury. I had one client one time that told me that every time they tried to smell any food, anything, any strong smells, it always smelled like piss. Period. They were on the point of anorexia. They couldn't eat because everything they put in their mouth tasted like piss. I had somebody else said everything tastes like chocolate, and they gained 80 pounds. Okay? You just don't know. You don't know what you're going to get there. Okay? But just be aware that if you have that happening, then it's potentially related to a brain injury. Not necessarily. So those are our physical symptoms, and next we're going to flesh out the cognitive symptoms. These are the thinking type of symptoms, right? Attention, concentration, perception, memory, speech or language, slurring of words, choosing the wrong words, not having words that are adequate for your level of education and experience and expertise, or executive functions. Okay? Now, what are executive functions? Executive functions are perhaps the most important part of mild traumatic brain injuries. These are the functions that separate us from the animals. They truly do. Our ability to think, to plan, to react appropriately in appropriate situations, okay? To change our plans as situations change. To multitask. These higher functions that really make us productive adults. When that's impaired, the person can need 24/7 care, okay? If they can't think appropriately, if they can't plan, if they can't make changes to plans, they're going to put themselves at danger, and they're going to put other people at danger. Next, behavioral issues. We see changes or alterations in emotional responsivity, irritability, quickness to anger, disinhibition. Okay, these are the things we're talking about when we have somebody that goes off the reservation when they really shouldn't. You know, I really shouldn't be that mad and decide that I'm going to ram the car in front of me that just cut in front of me. Okay? Particularly when you have somebody who before might have been mild-mannered, might have been completely normal, and now all of a sudden they act like a nut, right? What happens to marriages with these behavioral changes? Anybody know? 85% of marriages, if you have somebody with persistent brain injury issues, fail. Mainly because the way the other spouse treats them. They're irritable all the time. They're not sleeping right. They're mean. This is not the person I married. You remember what I said earlier when the lady came in my office? This is not the person I married. We need help. That's what you'll see in recognizing traumatic brain injuries. All right, other golden nuggets. There are other nuggets in this definition that we're going to explore mainly because they're going to help you with defenses, okay? Traumatic brain injuries may also be overlooked in the face of more dramatic physical injuries. In the ER, they're worried about saving your life. They're not worried about saving your functioning as far as how you think. They're worried about, are they going to bleed to death? Is their airway restricted? Are they going to be able to leave this hospital and walk out? Those are the things that they're concerned about. In that situation, teasing out issues that are going to prove up brain injuries just sometimes don't happen. They're not high on the priority list. Now, sometimes we will see them, okay? One of the reasons that we really need to interview people for these symptoms and that we need to scrub the medical records for these symptoms is sometimes the symptoms are documented in the medical record. They just never link it to a traumatic brain injury. So when you have that adjuster who says, well, this wasn't diagnosed for 6 months, you can go back to the ambulance record, or you can go back to the ER record. You can talk about how there was an altered mental state. You can talk about the pain that they had, the headaches that they were showing, the behavioral changes that they had. You can go back and find those things and say, oh, it's been documented in the medical record over and over and over again. They just didn't call it traumatic brain injury. But these are the symptoms, and we haven't excluded it, and they finally get to the right diagnosis. Okay? So that's how you can deal with that. That's another golden nugget. Another golden nugget in the comments. Patients may not be aware or admit the extent of their symptoms until they attempt to return to normal functioning. Why is that important? When somebody's brain injured, do you really think that they're going to be the best reporter of their own symptoms? Think about that. If their executive functions are screwed up, are they even going to be aware of how bad they are? They're going to think they're normal. And people around them, their loved ones, are going to think they're insane. That's what you see, right? That's what you're looking for. Okay. If you take it all together, you've got a roadmap now. You've got a definition. You've got a definition that's really unassailable. If you set up right the defense expert. We have an idea about how to handle common defenses like failing to diagnose, right? We have a roadmap for how to recognize these and how to prosecute them. Now, I knew that I'd have a little time, so I want to talk to you a little bit about helpful hints about how to interview these folks. To begin with, you've got to have somebody, a loved one, somebody that they care for, somebody that's there close. You need to interview that person, okay? You need that wife or that husband or that girlfriend or boyfriend or that brother or sister who knew them before and knew them well. And they can tell you, hey, wait a minute, this is off, this is wrong. You need that person that can go to the doctors with them, that can make sure that they're fully telling the doctors what their symptoms are, because you know what? They're forgetting their own symptoms. Why is it not documented? They've forgotten their own symptoms. They're in there by themselves. If you see this, if you suspect you've got a potential brain injury, make sure they go in with somebody that can help build your case by making sure that the symptoms are all in the medical records. I mean, to me, that's one of the most critical things. The most critical witnesses you have in these cases are the significant other. I mean, you can take the neuropsychologist, you can take all the advanced imaging technologies and that sort of thing that we'll talk about in a minute perhaps. You can take all that and throw it out the window if you have a good enough witness, a good enough before and after witness. Somebody that can say, look, before, this is who this person was, and this is all that's left now. Okay? That's all the jury has to have to find a traumatic brain injury and render a very good verdict. So it is critical to find that person and to use that. Okay, one of my pet peeves. Did you lose consciousness? Why on earth would we expect somebody to have a conscious memory of an unconscious event? Right? But doctors do it all the time. They ask them in the ER, did you lose consciousness? The only way the person's going to know is if somebody else told them, right? It is not a good question. It's fine to lead out with it. Did you lose consciousness? How do you know you lost consciousness? That's fine. The better question is, what's the last memory you had before the wreck? What's the last thing you remember? And then, what's the first thing you remember after that? Is there a gap in time? Help them identify the gap in time. Okay? That will help you lead to loss of consciousness. It'll also help you lead to the amnesia that you could need under the definition as well. All right. Scrub those medical records. Look at the medical records and ask the witnesses. I didn't put ask the witnesses in here. I should have. My bad. Ask the witnesses about loss of consciousness or alterations in mental state. They'll tell you, because it's pretty damn scary when you get on when you come upon a wreck and you've got somebody that's just wandering all out in the middle of the road and doesn't know where they are, or somebody you run onto somebody that's unconscious and you think they're dead, right? That's a scary thing. If you've ever been through it, you're going to remember it, and these people can give you really good testimony. So if you have an ambulance record that says no loss of consciousness, but you have somebody that was on the scene when it happened, so, oh yeah, that person was out. They were out of their mind for a while. They were out completely or they were out of their mind for a while, okay? That's information that the ambulance driver may not have had because by the time the ambulance arrived, perhaps the person had regained their senses, okay? So scrub those records and get those witness statements. Next, confabulation. Now this is an odd one. Confabulation is the way the brain works when you have somebody, particularly somebody that's really, really bright. Here's what happens. Most of you, if you lost consciousness in a car wreck, would be subject to potential confabulation. So here's what happens in your mind. Your mind has a memory of something happened immediately before the wreck. Your mind has a memory of something immediately after the wreck. The mind does not have a memory of anything in between. So what does the mind do? A, C, therefore B. And the mind makes it up. And it is as real and as concrete to that person as anything else in their life. Their mind has imprinted it as a memory, and it is there. It is not made up The mind makes it up. It's not a conscious effort to deceive. One of the ways we know we're dealing with confabulation. Did I say that right? No. No. One of the reasons we know we're dealing with the problem, is when we have it in situations in which they wouldn't lie about it. So I'll take you back to the client I had with a real big case. He swears to me that he was hit by a Ford Ranger, a black Ford Ranger, that probably had $25,000 of coverage at the time. In reality, he was hit by a courtesy van, a huge white courtesy van of a local car dealership with $10 million in coverage. Would he have any motivation to lie about that? Okay? But he swore up and down, and would swear today up and down, 17 years later, that it was a black Ford Ranger. Confabulation works that way. Okay? This man was in line to be the CFO of Raytheon. He very, very bright man. Okay? With bright people, their minds know that there's a blank and they will fill it in. So just be on the lookout for that. When they tell you something, particularly when they tell you something about the accident, about the injury, you've got to verify it other ways. You just have to, because they're frequently wrong. They're insistent, they're persuasive, but they're wrong. So check up on it. All right. I told you guys I would give you a tool. The tool is Exhibit B to the paper. You can take that, steal it, put your name on it, and start using it tomorrow in your firms. Okay? Whether you yourself are interviewing these folks or whether your staff members are, we go down the physical symptoms, each and every one. We go down the cognitive, and we go down the behavioral. All the ones that we've identified, we're going down. We've got a check box to see whether they're having it or not, and then a line so that you can fill in how they're exhibiting it, right? Important for you to know. Important for you to know to make sure that it gets medically documented, right? But you have a tool. I told you I would give you a tool. Many of you won't need it, but some of you will. You got a tool now. All right. Now, you think you've identified a client with a TBI. What do you do next? The first thing is to make sure those symptoms are documented. You've got to make sure they're in the medical record. The earlier the better. It prevents worlds of problems when settlement time comes, particularly if the symptoms are persistent. If they get better over time, it's still important to document it so you can show that they've had a TBI, even if they made good recovery from it. Have family at the appointments to report the history. Get that significant other there. Very, very important. That way you get a full picture. That way that doctor gets a true picture and not an impaired picture from an impaired person. Next, get at least a good neurological evaluation at a bare minimum to document any current deficits that they have, because there are physical deficits sometimes that can be documented that will help you with the case. Stuff that can't be made up, right? Next, treat it like it's a big case until you know that it's not, right? We don't know if this person that is suffering the symptoms is going to be better in 2 months, or 2 years from now they're going to have a complete meltdown and not going to be able to take care of themselves. Some of the symptoms, one of the symptoms that we had that we didn't really talk about, but it's in the paper and in the list, it develops sometimes over a longer period of time. We can have epileptic seizures develop, okay, seizure type of activities. Those can develop up to a year and a half, 2 years later. Seizure activity is something that, if you have it, if you got epileptic seizures, you've got a bad TBI, go get help immediately. I'm just telling you, if that happens. But treat it like it's big until you know it's not. Until you know they're well, these additional things can happen. And again, when they try to resume the normal activities of daily life, they will fall absolutely flat. They think they're going to be fine at work. They show up, and now all of a sudden the accountant can't make month-end adjustments to the books. That's what happens. When they resume their normal life, They try to resume it, they fall apart. So treat it like it's big until you know it's not. Last, reach out for further workup if you've identified one and you need help. There are members all over this association that have handled these cases and done very good work with them. Okay? The listserv is a great resource for getting good information about TBI and how to treat TBI and other methods, other things we might want to do to enhance these cases. AAJ has a great TBI listserv that I'm a member of. It's good. It's a great listserv to learn more. Again, that or experienced colleagues. Bonus injury. So before I go to the bonus injury, I want to tell you one thing. Well, no, we're going to do the bonus injury first. If I get to tell you one other thing, I'll do that at the end. All right. There's an injury that frequently comes along with TBIs that is often overlooked. It's an injury to your hormone system. Okay? The pituitary gland is located at the base of the brain. If you injure it, you can have a low level of what's called ADH, antidiuretic hormone. It'll produce headaches, fatigue, vomiting, confusion, convulsions. Why is that important? Those are a lot of the same symptoms that we see with a TBI. Okay? If we have a pituitary gland issue, that can occur. Now, over time, we'll see additional symptoms that will come up. Sexual dysfunction is very common after you've had pituitary issues. The other thing that will happen is it will affect your growth hormone, the HGH level. Now, that level is detectable by a blood test. Are lights going off for anybody here yet? They're detectable by a blood test. If they're detectable by a blood test, guess what? They are also treatable by hormone replacement therapy. So what can happen if you identify this pituitary issue and they measure the levels of HGH and the levels are low, the replacement therapy can be the basis of a very good life care plan. It's expensive, and it's something that somebody will need for the rest of their lives. Okay? There's something else about these injuries that really, if you have one, you really want to emphasize it. Everybody see where the pituitary gland is? First time I saw that, I about fell out of my chair. Those are the balls to the brain, guys. I mean, think about this. What man are you going to put on the jury that when you talk about this pituitary gland getting twisted and torn and bruised is not going to wince? Right? And we can prove it because we have low HGH levels now. We didn't have low levels before. And now we have this beautiful life care plan that calls for this replacement of this necessary hormone in order for them to function properly, to think properly, to help clear their head. It's great for the case and it's great for the client because if they do have this and if you do treat them, a lot of times they will get better. Now, many of you guys know Will Adams, right? Will and I had a case together and the TBI doctor that we were working with said, let's test this person for HGH levels. Okay, fine. It came back low, put a life care plan together, and he got $1.3 million on the case without having to do a whole lot. Primarily because at mediation, he's able to show a picture like that and say, this was hurt in this car wreck. The balls of the brain were stretched and torn and contorted. Carrie didn't want any part of it. So that's your bonus injury. Now, I don't know how much time I have, but I'm going to finish anyway. I got 5 minutes. Okay, perfect. I'm going to give you guys a minute or two. These cases are really difficult. Okay? They're hard, not just because they're hard to work up, they're hard because of the clients. The clients are not responsive a lot of times to doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. So you have to babysit them a whole lot more. You've got to make sure they go to the doctor. Sometimes that means calling them over and over and over again. Sometimes it means picking them up and getting in there. They forget about things. They don't multitask well. Okay? They're mean. They're assholes. Sometimes. We just finished one, right, Charlie? We just finished one with a man that would call us literally 3 or 4 times a week and tried to fire me at least once a week. That's what they do. When that happens, just know that you're going to deal with that. Prepare your staff for that. Tell them this person is brain injured. They're not going to act like normal people. They're going to be a jerk from time to time. And sometimes when you talk to them about it, when you talk to them about the symptoms, you can say, listen, when you see this happening, it's time to back off. When you see yourself starting to spin, don't send me emails at 3 in the morning trying to fire me. Okay? Calm down. Call in the morning. Let's talk it over. I'll talk you off the ledge. People with traumatic brain injuries are at high risk of suicide. At high risk of suicide. People with traumatic brain injuries will trash every relationship in their life. So that person that loves them, that person that's helping you get them to the doctor, that person may need counseling. Okay? They very well might need it in order just to live with the person, just to survive it. If they know in advance what they're facing, they're more likely to be the 15% that is able to recover from a traumatic brain injury and at least maintain a relationship. Okay? They're hard cases, but they can be very valuable to your practice. And if you can identify things like a pituitary issue, or if you can get appropriate cognitive therapy, that it can actually make their life better. Okay? Most of the recovery that people with brain injuries get, they get within the first 6 months. They get a fair amount in the first year, and they get almost all they're going to get in 2. Okay? So it's like a reverse exponential curve, right? We don't know where they're going to be. So treat them like they're big cases until you know they're not. And that's really all I have for you guys. And thank you for your attention.